Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Watercolor Scientist, where watercolor is science and we ask weird questions, we test our hypotheses, and we share our results with the world. Today, we're applying the scientific method to test out the new ish Roman Szmal Aquarius mini urban sketching set, a compact set that promises portability, pigment quality, and a unique character for sketching on the go. So let's see how it holds up. So, this set is marketed as an urban sketching palette. It's small, it's portable, and it's versatile. You can see that it comes in the most adorable, tiny gold palette. Well, mine is gold. It also comes in peach, blue, and one other color that I can't remember right now. My hypothesis, though, after examining the colors, the paints, swatching them out, and painting with them, my hypothesis is that while it offers excellent pigment quality and beautiful granulation, its color choices, especially the lack of a very important cool primary, limits its mixing range for everyday sketching. So, as I mentioned, I chose the gold metal case, which is extremely sleek, small. You can see it compared to my hand, that I have average size hands, and it is about half the size of my hand. So it's really tiny and adorable. And it is lightweight and definitely sturdy enough for travel. It's an extremely well built case. The change in the tariff situation had already taken place where I live by the time that I was ready to purchase this. So a friend kindly brought it to me during their trip to England, which was extremely nice of them. So the price for this was £29, which broke down to about $39.15 US dollars. And that breaks down to $4.89 per pan. This, of course, doesn't include the price of the palette. The palette is really nice. I'm sure that that probably would make the price per pan breakdown to be a little bit more appealing. As far as other specifications, there are 8 colors in total. You can see from my swatches here that we've got Nickel Azo Gold, PY150, PR102 as our warm yellow. We've got Aquarius Orange with no pigment information provided, and this acts as the closest thing to our warm red. Quinacridone Red, PV19 for our cool red. French Ultramarine, PB29 for our warm blue. Cobalt Sea Blue, PB28. This could have functioned as our cool blue, but unfortunately, not unfortunately because it is beautiful, but unfortunately for the purpose of using it for a cool blue, it does lean extremely green. Autumn Green is next. This acts as our convenience green for the set, and this is PG26, PY150, and PR122. The earthy color in the palette is burnt sienna brownish, which is one of Roman Szmal's newest paints, and that's PBR7. And the set includes shadow violet, which is a convenience mix of PG50, PB29, and PV19. And this is essentially the neutral for the set. It would kind of take a similar role as a Payne's gray or an indigo might take in a set, or maybe like a neutral tint or something like that. So as you can see, there are two big gaps in this set. There is no cool yellow and there is no cool blue. Personally, I don't use cool yellow in my painting process very often. I do think they can be useful. They're just not useful to me. So I did not miss that very much. But I will tell you later on how much I did miss a cool blue. There's also no proper warm red. They opt instead for Aquarius orange. I did not find that to be a problem. I thought it would be more of an issue for mixing, but no, it actually was fine. There was no problem with it at all. And there is also no purple or violet in this set, but because you have quinacridone red, which is a cool red, and French ultramarine, which is a warm blue, purple mixing, not a problem. As far as paint quality, so if you look inside the set, you'll see that well, number one, you'll see that this set has been well loved by me. So it definitely has some dents in there, but all the paint pans were filled right to the top. They re-wet so easily and quickly. All of these paints are extremely light fast, especially if we take the light fastness ratings for Aquarius Orange at face value. 8 out of 8 paints are light fast. 4 of the 8 paints are single pigment paints. I'm not counting Aquarius Orange in here, although I suspect that it is a single pigment paint. I have read that it is PO 107. And if that counts, then 5 out of the 8 paints are single pigment paints. And very strikingly, out of the 8, 6 are granulating. And that comes into play very prominently later on. And as I mentioned, these paints all have very high tinting strength, and a little goes a long way. And there was no issues with gumminess or binder separation in the pans. Believe it or not, it happens. So based on my swatches, you can see that I swatched each color on 100% cotton watercolor paper. So I wanted to see how the gradated washes would look with some glazing. And you can see that number one, these are all incredibly vibrant. Number two, they gradate very beautifully and easily, even the paints that are very granulating. And you can see that the diluted washes are, I mean, these paints are a dream. They're really very beautiful. So the diluted washes are beautiful. The wet and wet swatches here are to check out their flow and dispersion, and to check for any weird flocculation, and to see if they granulate. So if you take a close look at the wet and wet washes, the granulating paints granulate as they should. You can see that the French ultramarine, the cobalt sea blue, especially the autumn green and shadow violet. I mean, look at that gorgeous granulation. Ah, so beautiful. The only paint that had slightly strange dispersion on in a wet and wet wash was quinacridone red. You can see that there was some flocculation and some almost graininess in it. I didn't have an issue with it at all while painting, but I thought I would mention that. I also went ahead and tested to see what the best complementary pairs are in this set, which is something that I like to do in every set, and I highly recommend that you do as well, because knowing what to mix for a quick and easy black or gray is very important. You can make a cool grayish kind of mix with autumn green and shadow violet. Um, this is a tricky mix because both of these paints are heavily granulating, and there are essentially 6 pigments in this mix. Um, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. You can also make a very beautiful, warm gray with French ultramarine and burnt sienna brownish. Both of these paints are granulating. Again, this comes into play later. You can also make a decent gray mixing the closest to the 3 primaries that I could find, which was Nicolezo yellow, quinacridone red, and French ultramarine. And you can see that you can get a nice gray with that. So the next thing that I did, which again I do with every set, is testing what mixes it can make. And for my purposes, I don't like to make those big color charts. They're very beautiful. I love to watch those videos, but I don't find it useful for my own practice because frankly, I don't need to know every mix something can make. I just need to know if it can mix the things that I need it to mix. And really, most of the time, I want to know, can my palette make oranges? Can it make purples? Can it make turquoises? Because I paint with turquoises a lot. Can it make good greens? Can I make a good brown? And I need some really nice neutrals because I mix a lot of neutrals. I don't use convenience neutrals or browns really that much. So you can see that with Nicolezo yellow and Aquarius orange in the mix, you're going to get oranges. That's not the issue here. As far as purples, there are a variety of ways to mix really nice purples. You can mix them very beautifully by mixing quinacridone red with French ultramarine. You can get some beautiful ones with quinacridone red and cobalt sea blue. Um, and yeah, you can get some really nice purples with that. And if you dilute the shadow violet, of course, you're going to get some nice purples with that as well. Mixing quinacridone red with shadow violet also gives you some nice purples. And you can see that all right here. Turquoises are not a problem here. You can get some really beautiful turquoises using mixes with the cobalt sea blue. Mixing French ultramarine with autumn green will get you some very nice mixes with turquoise as well. Greens as well are not a problem here. You can get some gorgeous greens just by mixing autumn green with anything. Autumn green, I had never tried this paint by Roman Szmal before, and it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. The mix is actually somewhat similar to Holbein's Sap Green, except instead of PG7, Autumn Green uses PG26. And let me tell you, that makes a huge difference. And it paints really, really beautifully. You can also get some very nice greens, diluting nickel azo gold with shadow violet. Um, and yeah, those are the way that I made the nicest greens, in my opinion. Oh, and mixing French ultramarine with burnt sienna brownish, of course, gets you some very nice greens. As far as browns, so I didn't use burnt sienna brownish to make browns. I want to make that clear. I mixed all of these browns with other methods. So the best way that I found to make browns is by mixing the Aquarius orange with the French ultramarine. You can get some really beautiful, like burnt sienna type of situations. And using a mix of either nickel azo gold with Aquarius orange or quinacridone red with Aquarius orange and mixing it with either French ultramarine or cobalt sea blue, you can get some really, really nice browns. No problems there. And you can see that I achieved a very beautiful burnt umber type of situation there. And neutrals as well, not a problem. You can mix neutrals not just with autumn green and shadow violet, as I mentioned previously, and with French ultramarine and burnt sienna brownish, but you can also just make any type of palette mud on with this beautiful set, and you will get a beautiful neutral. Not a problem. Okay. So, I wanted to next kind of go into, we've talked about the specifications for this palette. I wanted to go ahead and talk about one more aspect before showing you the painting. Um, as far as granulation. So, I mentioned that 6 out of the 8 paints granulate. And this is not a bad thing or a good thing. Everything in art is dependent on the artist. And I want to make that clear. For me, I paint a lot of abstracts. I paint a lot of botanicals. Um, I like to paint portraits. So granulation is not what I am looking for in for those types of paintings. I do like granulation with some botanicals, and I like it for landscapes, and I even like it for some abstracts. But it's not generally what I want to predominate in what I'm painting. I love granulation. Now I want to make that clear. I love granulation, but I like it in moderation and in a way that I can control when it appears. And I cannot believe that me, the watercolor scientist, is saying this. But I think this set has too much granulation. I know, sacrilege, but I really do think it does. And the reason why I say this is because mixing with this palette is actually quite challenging because of the heavy granulation. These are mostly granulating paints, and it is, in fact, impossible to mix a non granulating neutral. The reason for that is because the paints that don't granulate um, are in the warm side of the spectrum. And of course, to make a neutral, you need a good cool. There are no uh, non granulating cools. And so, a non the ability to mix a non granulating neutral to me is extremely important. And if I can't do that, then that limits the versatility of the set that I'm painting with. Another limitation, um, there is no pigment information for Aquarius orange. I know that that's not, an attempt at deception or anything silly like that by the company. I think that it has to do with I read about it. I immediately forgot why, but there's a good reason for it. But again, it is a limitation for me. The third thing that really limits this set for urban sketching um, and in general is the lack of a cool blue. Cobalt sea blue is, again, it can act as a cool blue in theory if it leans bluer, I guess, if it leans closer to a cerulean. I will tell you that I find cerulean in and of itself hard to mix with as a cool blue to begin with, but it's much easier than it is with a cobalt turquoise type of hue. I found that it was hard to use cobalt sea blue as one might use a cool blue in a set. And that does limit its mixing potential by a factor of a lot. Um, yeah, so that's the last thing that I wanted to mention before going on to the painting. So the painting might actually help to make clear what I mean by the limitations that I found in the set. So I did make a small urban sketch using only this set. I wish I could have painted this from life, but I used this as from an image on Pixabay, which I thought was a really charming little cobblestone scene. Um, and so you can see it on screen. I tried to capture a street scene with a variety of textures. Some smooth walls, some like stucco walls, concrete, brick, foliage, dark shadows, and sky, of course. And this was a cloudy sky. And so while painting, I noticed a few things. The granulation gives you really beautiful organic textures, especially in the walls. You can see it, especially like maybe right here, and you can see it when I use French ultramarine blue over here. And it gives you really beautiful granulation in the shadows as well. So you can see it right here. And this was a window reflection. I had never painted that before, so that was really cool. Um, the palette, because of the granulation, it does encourage kind of more loose and expressive painting rather than precise painting. And again, that's really beautiful in certain settings. I with this painting, that's not what I wanted. I wanted something with more precision. I generally want that. Um, but if that's your style, then this would be a great palette for you. It was really tricky to mix clean sky blues or even like a nice deep like green without a cool blue. I would honestly even take like a phthalo turquoise. I would even take a phthalo green. But the lack of something strongly tinting and transparent in that region really limited my mixing. So it was a cloudy sky here, but it was not gray. I just could not achieve a deep blue that was smooth and wasn't leaning too green or too purple, which is kind of the bad thing with choosing cobalt sea blue as your as a cool-ish blue and French ultramarine as your warm blue. It was also kind of tricky to mix really deep, cool greens. Again, because of that. Shadow violet and autumn green. Remember that we saw that it makes a nice cool neutral. It does create nice shadows. It creates especially nice shadows on foliage. You can see it all through here. It is very heavily granulating. And that separation, like I feel like you just have to embrace it and not fight it. And everything will be a little bit easier after that. But you can see that I mixed with the shadow violet. I was able to mix some very dark. I This was painted almost exclusively with shadow violet, and you can see that I was really struggling to make really dark. So I had to use the paint very, very thick and undiluted. It worked out okay, but you can definitely see here that the granulation is really apparent. And again, that's not my favorite thing. Overall, though, I did find that it was a very enjoyable painting experience. The paints, I mean, they're so fun to use. And the painting does have a certain moody, atmospheric quality that I do like. Um, okay, so essentially, in conclusion, what are the strengths? So the strengths again are excellent paint quality, no binder issues, excellent light fastness, and really strong tinting strength. I painted with this a lot, and I've really barely made a dent except in the shadow violet. Um, Beautiful granulation and texture, and an affordable price point for this level of quality uh, artist paints. It's not cheap, given it's only 8 half pounds, but I do think that it's worth the price, especially to get such an adorable little palette. As far as the limitations, we talked about how it's missing a cool blue, and that makes it harder to mix some clean secondary colors and to paint skies. It's difficult to achieve smooth neutrals or deep inky blacks with this mix. And the cobalt sea blue, while beautiful, feels less useful in this set, partly because it's not a great mixing color, but partly because I would find cobalt sea blue to be more useful in a landscape or in an ocean painting, but in an urban sketching, I don't know. I can't really think of when I would need a cobalt sea blue in urban sketching. I live in a really big city, and cobalt turquoise or cobalt sea blue is not a color that I ever really use when I'm out and about painting. I don't know. Can you think of a situation in which cobalt turquoise or cobalt sea blue would be useful in an urban sketching setting? Let me know. Put it in the comments. I'm honestly really curious. I can't think of one. So my recommendations are, yes, absolutely, I recommend the set. No question about it. I would definitely add to improve and make the set more versatile. I'd add a phthalo blue, a phthalo turquoise, I'll take a phthalo green. I wouldn't find it as useful, but it would give me a nice, cool primary. I can work with it. I'd be able to mix a very dark inky black with the queen red. Beautiful. Done. I'll take it. But I'd prefer a phthalo blue or a phthalo turquoise. And I often find myself reaching for buff titanium or lavender as a soft, dreamy neutral. And it is a great mixer in urban sketching for stone and concrete and faded walls and things like that. I even find it very useful for skies. So I think my recommendations would be to add phthalo turquoise. This is PB16 or number 338, and Lavenda, PW6, PV29, and PV16. I had both of these before I bought this set, and I've since added them, and I have found that it's really improved the mixing potential for this set. So, final verdict, this is a very high quality but somewhat particular and specialized set. If you love granulation and you want very expressive, loose, textured sketches, this set is for you. But if you need clean mixes, reliable darks, and your palette leans more on the cool side, then you'll need to supplement this set with a couple of extra colors. And that's not a bad thing. It's just something to keep in mind. And I know we all have enough paint somewhere in our stashes to just add a couple of half pans of something else. So this wraps up this experiment with the Roman Small Aquarius Mini Urban Sketching Set. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate you being here with me and listening to this extremely granular, no pun intended, breakdown on this wonderful little set. And remember that watercolor is a science. So, ask weird questions, test your hypothesis, and share your results with the world.